Hi, this is Lauren from Daisy Cottage Designs, and I'm here with a video tutorial for you today on a V-stitch crochet scarf. I made this scarf over the weekend and I really enjoyed this pattern, and I wanted to go ahead and make a video tutorial to go along with it. So today I am using a J crochet hook. This is my favorite hook. It's the tulip hook. It's a J or a 10, and that's a 6mm hook. And I am using worsted weight yarn. It's Hobby Lobby. I love this yarn in the shade River Ripple. And I've really enjoyed working with this yarn. I love the slight print it has to it, but I like that it's not an ombre. It's pretty consistent. It just has some different shades woven throughout. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through how to make this scarf. So if you're making this scarf, you're going to want to start with a chain of 30. But for this tutorial and to make it quicker, I'm going to start with a chain of 12. But any multiple of 3 will work for the V-stitch that I'm going to show you today. So if you are going ahead and starting the scarf, go ahead and chain 30. And if you're working along with me to make a little swatch, let's chain 12. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So we have our chain of 12, and you remember that any multiple of 3 will work. And the first thing you're going to want to do is work a single crochet row. So we are going to single crochet in the second chain from the hook and in each chain across. So whether you have a chain of 12 or a chain of 30, you're going to want to single crochet in the second chain and in each chain across. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So whatever your starting chain was, you will end up with 1 fewer single crochets. So I started with 12 chain stitches, so I ended up with 11 single crochets. If you started with 30 chain stitches, you'll end up with 29 single crochets. So we've worked our foundation row, and now what we are going to do is we are going to start working our V stitches. So our first step is to chain 1 and turn our work. Now that chain is not going to count as a stitch. It's just going to allow us to turn our work. I can't talk today. So what we're going to do now is we are going to double crochet in the very first stitch. So now that we have a double crochet in that very first stitch, what we're going to want to do is skip the next single crochet. So we're going to skip the next stitch, and we're going to work a V-stitch in the stitch after that. Now a V-stitch is very easy to make. What you're going to do is you're going to work a double crochet, a chain 1, and a double crochet into the same stitch. So let's do that. So we're going to work a double crochet, and now we're going to chain 1, and we're going to work another double crochet into that same stitch. So you can see we have our first V-stitch right there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to skip the next 2 stitches. So we're going to skip this single crochet and this single crochet, and then we're going to work a V-stitch into the stitch after that. So we'll work our first double crochet, then we'll chain 1, and we'll double crochet into that same stitch. So we just made our second V-stitch. You can see the first one here and the second one there. So now we're going to skip the next 2 single crochets, and we're going to work a V-stitch into the stitch after that. So there's our first double crochet. Then we're going to chain 1, and we're going to double crochet into the same stitch. And now what we're going to do to finish our row, we have 2 stitches left. We're going to skip the next to the last stitch and we'll work a double crochet into the last stitch. So we have a double crochet on each end and then V stitches in the middle. Now what a V stitch is it's a double crochet, a chain 1, and a double crochet. So this right here, let me grab my tapestry needle so I can point. This space in the middle is your chain 1 space. So on the next row, we are going to be working V stitches into these chain 1 spaces. So let me show you how we're going to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to chain 1 and turn our work. And now we're going to work a double crochet in that very first stitch. And now we're going to work our V stitches into those chain 1 spaces. So this is the center of the V stitch. We're going to work a V stitch right in there. So we'll work a double crochet. And so to do that, we're going to yarn over and insert our hook right under that chain. So you'll just stick your hook right in the middle of that V. So we'll work a double crochet and then a chain 1 and a double crochet all into that same space. Now we're going to go over here and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to work a V stitch into the middle of the second V. So we'll double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet into that same chain 1 space. So we just made our next V stitch. Now we're going to do the same thing in this next chain 1 space. So we'll double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet. And then we're going to work 1 double crochet into the last stitch of the row. So we'll skip this part of the V and then we'll work into the very last stitch. So we just made our second row of V stitches. So let's do another one. We'll chain 1 and turn our work. We're going to single crochet into the very first, not single crochet, we're going to double crochet into the very first stitch. Now we are going to work a V stitch into the middle of the V stitch from the previous row. So we'll double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet. Then we're going to work a V stitch into the next chain 1 space. So we'll double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet. We have 1 V stitch left. We're going to work our V stitch right here in the center of this V stitch. So double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, and then we're going to work a double crochet into the last stitch of the row. Now, if you feel like you're having a hard time finding the last stitch of the row, you can mark your first stitch of every row, and that will be the last stitch of the next row. All right, so I'm going to work a few more rows, and then I'm going to come back and show you how to add the fringe to your scarf. Oh, but first I want to tell you how many rows you're going to need to make. So if you're swatching and you're just making a little practice piece of fabric or a little practice sample, what you're going to do is just go until you're comfortable with the stitch. If you're working your scarf, you started with a chain of 30 and you want to make your scarf just like mine, you're going to work 117 rows of the V stitch, and then you're going to add a row of single crochets at the end, and then you're going to add your fringe. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to add a few more rows of the V stitch, then I'll come back and show you how to do that final row of single crochets, and then I'll show you how to do the fringe. Okay, so I added a couple more V-stitch rows. Now I'm going to add my final row of single crochets. So I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work, and I'll single crochet into this first stitch, and then I will single crochet into the next stitch, and then I'm going to single crochet into the middle of my V-stitch. So I'm going to single crochet into this part of the V-stitch, and then I'm going to single crochet into this part of the V-stitch, and then I'm going to have to single crochet into the middle. So I'm going to do stitch, stitch, middle. Then I'm going to do that again. Stitch, stitch, and middle. And then at the end, I'll crochet into this stitch of the V, and then my last stitch of the row. So just one thing to check as you're doing your final row, you want to make sure you end with the same number of single crochets as you started with. So I started with 11 single crochets, which is one fewer than the number of chains. So I want to make sure I have 11. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I have the right number of stitches. And if you started with a chain of 30 and then 29 single crochets, you'll want to make sure you end with 29 single crochets on that last row. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and weave these ends and then show you how to add my fringe. And really, if you wanted to, you could just leave this as part of the fringe, but I like to keep it all uniform, so I'm going to go ahead and weave those and then come back and show you how I add my fringe. Okay, so I have my finished swatch, and what I want to do is show you how to add the fringe. So what you're going to want to do is cut a piece of yarn that is approximately 10 inches long. I'm not measuring, I really am just approximating. And what you're going to want to do is make a loop from that yarn. So I just loop it around and make sure the ends match up. So I have my loop, and then what I do is I take my hook and I'm going to insert it from back to front into one of these stitches. So you can see you have your single crochet stitches on each end. So I am just going to work from back to front into one of those stitches. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to loop my yarn around the hook and pull it through to the back. So I have my loop of yarn going through the stitch, and I'm just going to grab the two ends and pull it down through that loop and pull it tight, just like that. And then I made that way too long, but you can see how I did it. So let me show you that again. So I'm going to cut my piece of yarn. It was long this time. And I'm going to make a loop out of my yarn, just like that. I'm going to insert my hook from back to front, and I'm going to wrap that loop around my hook and pull it through. So I have my loop in the back and my tails in the front, and I'm just going to pull those tails through the loop. Oh, if I can get my fingers to cooperate, and then pull it tight. And I'm just going to do that into every stitch on both sides. So on the scarf, you would need 29 loops of yarn for each side, which would be a total of 58. So I hope you enjoyed this pattern. I really loved making it. I'd love to see the photos of what you make. Just tag me on Instagram at Daisy Cottage Designs. And yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. And if not, happy crocheting.